Have you ever wondered why we often turn bowls twice when we're working with freshly cut logs? Today we're going to tackle that question and show you how the first stage of the process works. Let's get to work.
Welcome to Turning Stitches, I'm Sean. We help woodturners learn the craft to begin making fun projects faster. Today we're going to be working on rough turning bowls. What we're shooting for is to rough out a bowl, kind of like this. We're going to leave the walls thick, and then we're going to allow this to dry for several months. Then we'll come back, reattach it to the lathe for finished turning. The reason to rough turn a bowl is to allow it to dry. We've got a lot of moisture still in our log section, and cutting the bowl out kind of in this rough shape will allow it to dry much faster, and hopefully we can stop any cracking. We're going to be mounting our log section onto our scroll chuck using a wormwood screw, so let's get that mounted up. So I've got a pilot hole already drilled here in the center of the blank, and all I'm going to do is screw it onto our wormwood screw that's already mounted here in the scroll chuck. Another way to mount the bowl to kind of get everything started round would be using a faceplate. Since I've got a bunch of these bowls I'm going to be working on today, this is sort of the fastest, easiest method. So as long as this works, we'll be in good shape. If any of them fail, if we strip out that center, I'll switch to a faceplate on those blanks. We're going to start the day over here at the sharpening station. We'll be back here a lot as we go along, but it's always good to start with sharp tools. I don't know exactly how long I'd been using this tool before when I left off last time, so we're just going to get a nice edge on it here pretty quickly.
You can learn more about sharpening your wood turning tools at the video link here.
I always like to use jigs as much as possible when I'm sharpening. It just helps me. As you can see, it's a pretty quick process. That's all we need. And the jigs help make that consistent and fast. So we're going to start off with our 1/2-inch bowl gouge. This will be the gouge we use for most of our work today. I've got everything mounted up here, ready to go. I've already kind of tested it. We'll start out at about 600 RPMs. This blank is relatively balanced, but it's still going to be a little bit of a rough ride till we get it round. So I always like to try to get the blank as round as possible here before we start adding shape. So now we're going to come around to the bottom, get rid of all this bark. Definitely want a faceplate on for this. I do like to use the tailstock as much as I can here in this process. Just kind of helps keep everything secure and on the lathe. So even though we're still just roughing things out here, all that bark down here doesn't take long to dull a tool. It's like any other time, once you feel you're really having to put some effort into cutting, you've already got a dull tool. Once we've got all the bark off the bottom and we've kind of got solid wood down here, I'm going to make a couple marks. I've got my caliper set to my chuck jaws. So I want my tenon to be pretty big. Ultimately, we'll use that material for the foot of the bowl. But on the chuck jaws, it'll kind of get oblong. So I want to use a larger tenon, about the largest that I can get in the chuck jaws I'm going to be using. And then once the bowl is dry, I can get the tenon round and then grip back onto it. So I want to give myself some excess material so that later when we compress those chuck jaws, we have a little flexibility once we get the tenon back round after everything's dry. This kind of gives us the guideline where we want to go. So we're going to get our tenon here where we've got marked. And then we'll start rounding off the rest of the bowl.
If you're getting value out of the video so far, hit that like button.
And just like I normally do, I want to get a dovetail shape on my tenon. I always use my skew chisel, just kind of use it basically as a scraper here. We're just scraping action. And this will give me the shape I want for my chuck jaws. Then I also want to make sure I've got that spot right there flat, got a good crisp corner in there, so that later when we flip this around to hollow it out, our chuck jaws seat right up against the bottom of the bowl. With our tenon in place, the next thing we need to do is just kind of work off this bottom corner of the bowl and start getting our shape and size on the rest of it. So we'll just kind of start out here on the edge and work away. So in this bowl, we're shooting for a specific size. So I've got a line here. This is a little bit wider than where we'll end up, but this just kind of gives me a target to start working from. So we're going to come from the top of the bowl and work down just to try to get the size. Make sure I don't make the bowl too small.
Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can see how we finish turning these bowls once they're dry.
Trying to size the bowl, I also know roughly where I want how much height ultimately needs to come off the bowl. So we're just going to kind of get a quick measurement here. And this will give us plenty of room. And then when we hollow the bowl, we'll kind of get it down to that line right there and we'll be in good shape. The last thing we'll do before we pull this blank off the lathe is just turn away this nub. That way we're ready to flip it around. So now we've got the outside of our bowls mostly shaped. We're over here, we've got it turned around, and now we're getting ready to hollow. One of the things I like to do really with any bowl is to drill a depth hole. Even though we're rough turning these and it's not critical, we're not going to go through the bottom, I do want the wall thickness to be pretty consistent so that it dries as consistent as I can get it. I've got this shop-made jig. It's just a dowel rod and a stick. Works out very well. Once we've got our measurement with the stick, our little dowel rod there, I'm just going to put a piece of blue tape here on this long drill bit I've got, and then we'll drill the hole. I've got the speed on the lathe turned down to about 325 RPMs or so. Got our drill chuck here, our long drill bit. All right, so we're going to start hollowing. The first step I'm going to do is just kind of remove, we've got about an inch of excess length here. That'll also help me get rid of the pith from the log and make sure we're down to good solid wood and pretty close to where we want the overall length on our bowl to be. So we're going to start by removing this waste material, and then we'll kind of refine the size a little bit. We'll kind of flatten this face. That'll get some of the bounce and wobble out of it. All right, we've got most of the waste off this end, so I want to get my diameter kind of dialed in that I'm looking for here for the rough turn. So I'm looking at, I want the bowl to finish at 8 inches. So I'm going to leave it at 8 1/4, which will give me a little bit of material to work with when I'm doing the final turning. So that gives me the diameter I'm shooting for. We'll kind of peel off this, get that outside shape, and then we'll get our inside, or kind of our wall thickness, pinned down here too. Okay, we're just going to very carefully kind of come in here, kind of finish, get our refining cuts here, get our bowl to a rough diameter. I'm going to leave the top, this top edge is going to be more or less straight. For about 1 inch or so. And then we'll just kind of work down here. Get our bowl shaped. Come back. Kind of refine that edge. Come around the back side with just a really light kind of shear scrape. Just to kind of finish. Get our shaping, get our curve. Now we're just going to keep hollowing down. I'm going to continue using my bowl gouge for most of it, especially this outer edge. And then to get the bottom, I'll end up switching to a bowl scraper. Kind of using a scraping motion here. I'll kind of go back and forth. Got to be careful as we get out here to the outside edge. If we get too much of the tool engaged, we will get a catch, so we don't want to do that. So then we'll come back in, kind of that double supported cut. Work that material out. Ooh. Way too aggressive. So now with the scraper, I'm just going to work all the way down to the bottom of our depth hole. I want to be careful over here on the side. Don't want to get too much of that scraper engaged. Don't want to get a catch and throw this thing off the chuck. With our wall thickness, we still can take the scraper all the way out to this outer edge.